My son looked at the cane I've used for 11 years and told me it would look bad in the wedding video. Let that sink in for a second, because I sat with it a lot longer than a second. My name is Frank Delacroix. I'm 57 years old. I've lived in Portland my whole life, worked the docks for 30 of those years, and up until about 2 months ago, I would have told you the worst day of my life was already behind me. I would have been wrong. Welcome to Karma's Door. Get comfortable, because this story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And trust me, you're going to want to be here for this one. Let me set the scene first, because that's where the whole thing cracked open. The private dining room at the golf club out in Lake Oswego smelled like candle wax and old money. Cloth napkins folded into little fans. A string quartet warming up in the corner, like anybody needed a string quartet for a rehearsal dinner. I sat near the end of a long table. My son Ethan 2 seats down next to his fiancée, her parents across from him laughing at something that wasn't funny, and Carol, my ex-wife, sitting close enough to her husband Doug that they looked like they'd rehearsed the seating chart. Doug had his arms slung over the back of Carol's chair like he'd built the club himself. Man's never done a day of physical labor in his life, and he sits there like his shoulders earned something. 30 years I spent on those docks. 30 years of loading and unloading freight in the rain. The cold, the noise, coming home smelling like diesel and salt. Coming home to a boy who used to run to the door before I even got my boots off. 30 years, and I'm sitting at that table like a guest who wandered in from the wrong party. The waiter set down some kind of seared scallop appetizer, and I reached for my water glass, and that's when I felt it. That little shift in the air you learn to recognize after enough years of people staring at parts of you they think are broken. Ethan's eyes dropped to my leg, to the cane leaning against my chair. I know what he saw. Everybody sees it eventually. 11 years now, I've walked with this thing. Hip fused wrong no matter how many surgeries they threw at it. Leg that doesn't bend the way a leg's supposed to bend. A limp so pronounced that strangers used to ask me if I was in a car accident. I've had 11 years to get used to people looking. I never really did. Ethan's jaw did this thing. This tight little clench, like he'd bitten into something he wasn't ready for. "Dad," he said, quiet at first, and then he leaned in, like he'd been practicing the words in a mirror. "I love you, but I need to talk to you about the toast." The table went a little quiet. Her mother suddenly found her wine very interesting. "You get winded standing for too long," Ethan said. "And with the cane, and the way you kind of sway when you stand up from sitting that long. I don't want people staring instead of listening." Doug offered to do it. He's good at that stuff. He does toasts at his business dinners all the time. He gestured at Doug like he was doing him a favor by naming him. "He's just smoother, Dad. And Amanda's family is very particular about how this day looks. I don't want anything to be awkward." A breath. Then the second half, the part that actually did the damage. "You can still sit up front. Just let him do the toast." Nobody said a word. Doug had the decency to stare hard at his scallops like they'd personally wronged him. Carol didn't. Carol looked almost relieved, like some weight had finally slid off her chest after 15 years of carrying it. I looked down at my hand wrapped around that water glass. "I want to tell you I said something. Some perfect line. Some gut punch of a comeback that put him in his place in front of that whole table. I didn't. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count, and every single time I do the exact same thing I did that night." I nodded. I picked up my cane. I stood up slow, careful, the way I always stand up, and I folded my napkin once, the way my father taught me, and I walked out of that room without saying a word. You raise a boy for 26 years. You give him everything you've got left in you, and he sits at a table full of strangers and tells you your body is an inconvenience for his wedding photos. Portland traffic on 43 South doesn't care that your chest just caved in. I sat in it for almost 40 minutes, radio off, just the sound of my own breathing and the hum of the engine. I kept looking down at my leg propped against the pedal, really looking at it the way you look at something after somebody's told you it's ugly. Like maybe this time you'll finally see what they see. I didn't cry. I want that on the record. Frank Delacroix does not cry in traffic on 43 South. But something sat in my chest the whole ride home, heavy and useless, all the way back to my apartment off Milwaukee Avenue in Selwood. Modest place. 1 bedroom. The kind of apartment a man rents when he's got money he refuses to spend on himself. I let myself in, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and stood in my kitchen, not knowing what to do with my hands, which, considering the conversation I'd just walked out of, felt like a cruel joke on top of everything else. I ended up in the 2nd bedroom, the one I call an office, though office is generous. It's a card table, a filing cabinet, and a shoebox I never got around to putting into a real photo album. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall and opened that box. First photo on top. Ethan, maybe 7 years old, powdered sugar all over his face, sitting on my shoulders outside a donut shop on Hawthorne, both of us grinning like idiots. There he is. There's my boy. And that's when it all came back. Not slow. All at once. Like a door blowing open in a storm. You want to know who I was before all this? I'll tell you. Every Saturday, rain or shine, Ethan would meet me down at the docks after my shift ended. I worked freight handling for a shipping company down on the Willamette. Good union job, steady pay, hands calloused from honest work. I'd still have my high-vis vest on, hard hat pushed back on my head, and he'd come tearing across the lot yelling, "Dad," like I'd been gone a year instead of a shift. We had a routine, donuts from that same shop on Hawthorne every single time. He always got the maple bar, always, no matter how many times I told him they had 30 other flavors. He'd hold my hand the whole walk there, swinging our arms like we owned the sidewalk. And when we got close to the loading yard, I'd hoist him up onto my shoulders so he could wave at the guys working the containers. "There's my hero!" he'd shout down at me, powdered sugar dusting onto my collar. Every one of my coworkers would laugh and wave back at him like he was a little celebrity. There was one guy, Ray Whitfield, worked the yard with me for going on 15 years, used to say, "Delacroix, that boy's going to run this whole port someday. You watch." I believed him. I believed every word of it. Those Saturdays were the best hours of my week. Better than payday, better than the Trailblazers making a real playoff run, which, let's be honest, wasn't happening near often enough to be a fair comparison anyway. I had no idea one of those Saturdays was going to be the last normal one. It started like any other. I had to swing by the yard office to sign off on a shipment before we headed home. Ethan came with me, same as always. Sat on an overturned crate, drawing on a scrap of cardboard, while I walked over toward the stacked containers to check numbers against a manifest. I heard it before I understood it. A deep groan of metal, like the whole yard clearing its throat. Then a crack that I felt in my teeth. A container stack, improperly secured by a crew that wasn't mine, had started to shift. Thousands of pounds of steel leaning, then falling, straight toward where Ethan was sitting. Ethan! I didn't think. There wasn't a single word in my head. My body just moved. I got to that crate in maybe 2 seconds flat and shoved him clear. Threw my own body into the gap where he'd been sitting, and the edge of that falling container caught me across the hip and leg as I twisted to get out of the way. It didn't kill me. It should have. It crushed bone instead. Mostly the hip, mostly the leg, because that's what I had planted between him and 40 tons of falling steel. I don't remember the pain the way you'd think. I remember Ray's voice screaming my name from somewhere far off. I remember the smell of hot metal and dust. I remember Ethan underneath the edge of that crate, completely unhurt, not one scratch on him. He walked away from that day without a single mark. I didn't. Ray saw the whole thing, ran over before anyone else even understood what had happened. Pulled Ethan clear while I was still down on the ground. He's never forgotten it. Man still calls me every year around the anniversary, just to check in. Some things you don't stop caring about, even when you're not the one who got hurt. I'd do it again. 1,000,000 times over, I'd do it again. That was never the question. The question, the one nobody bothered to ask me for 11 years, was what it would cost me after. You'd think a man who threw himself under falling steel for his son would earn something. Gratitude. A little grace. Maybe just the benefit of the doubt. Carol filed for divorce 5 months later. I remember sitting across from her in a lawyer's office downtown, my legs still in a brace, still relearning how to walk without help, and she wouldn't even look at it. You brought him to that yard, Frank. Flat, cold, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror, the same way Ethan would 20 years later. You're reckless. I can't trust you not to put him in danger again. Reckless. I nearly laughed. I would have laughed if it didn't hurt so much to move. Carol, I threw myself in front of, I know what you did. She cut me off sharp. I know exactly what you did. And that was the thing. She knew. She knew better than anybody. That's what made it so much worse. This wasn't ignorance. This was guilt wearing anger like a mask. Because it's easier to be furious at somebody than to sit with the fact that you weren't the one who saved your own kid. She got full custody, I got weekends. Then every other weekend. Then, slow as ice melting so gradual you don't notice the puddle until you're standing in it, I got less than that. And somewhere in those years, she started rewriting the story. I didn't catch it happening in real time. You never do. But looking back, I can trace it. Little comments filtered back to me secondhand. Ethan telling a teacher his dad got hurt because he wasn't paying attention. Ethan at 12 asking me why I let that happen. Not what happened to you. Why did you let that happen? 11 years Carol had that boy's ear every single day. I had him every other weekend if the schedule cooperated. You do the math on whose version of the story was going to win. She turned proof of how much I loved that boy into evidence against me. And I didn't even see her do it. The lawsuit against the shipping company took nearly 3 years to settle. Negligent stacking, falsified safety logs, a rigging crew that skipped inspection to save 2 hours. I won. Won big. The kind of settlement that changes a family's whole trajectory. I never touched a dime of it. I know how that sounds. My own attorney thought I was out of my mind. Frank, you could buy a house outright. You could retire tomorrow. And I sat there in his office, in the same steel-toe boots I'd worn my whole working life, and I said no. Because somewhere in the back of my head, Carol's voice was still there. Reckless. If I spent that money on myself, wasn't that proof she was right about me? So I did the only thing that made sense to a man who'd already given his body for his son. I put every dollar into a discretionary spendthrift trust. Locked, protected, managed by me alone, set to release at his milestones. 25th birthday, wedding, a house someday, if he wanted one. I kept working, took a trade after the accident. Precision fabrication work, steady hours, nothing flashy. Kept the same one-bedroom apartment. Drove a used Ford Ranger with 160,000 miles on it that I maintained myself, because I refused to pay a mechanic for work I could still do with my own 2 hands. Bad leg and all. People probably thought I was just cheap. Let them think that. The truth is, I was saving every dollar I never spent on myself for a boy who, by then, could barely stand to look at me straight on. Carol remarried when Ethan was 18. Doug Ferris. Smooth talker, always in a blazer, even on a Tuesday. Drove leased luxury cars he swapped out every 2 years like they were sneakers. Called himself a wealth consultant, which in my experience is what a man says when he's never actually built any wealth of his own. I didn't think much of him at first, figured he was harmless. Charming the way a car salesman is charming, but harmless. I was wrong about that too. Somewhere around Ethan's early 20s, Doug started taking a real interest in his finances, not mine. He knew I kept that trust locked up tight, no getting past me on that front. But Ethan's future access to it, that was a different door. Doug started talking to him about positioning himself early, about smart moves before the payout hit. Smart positioning. That's a fellow who's never had 2 nickels of his own money to position anywhere. He walked Ethan through paperwork one night. I know this now, pieced together after the fact. Paperwork that used Ethan's future trust distribution as collateral on a commercial real estate loan Doug needed for some boutique investment fund that never quite existed the way he described it. Told him it was routine. Told him it was safe. Told him, probably in that same smooth showroom voice, that he needed to sign it to protect what was coming to him. Ethan trusted him. He was desperate by then to impress the family he was marrying into, people who watched him like he was a stock they hadn't decided whether to buy yet. So he signed. He had no idea what he was signing away, and I had no idea at the time what Doug was building. Brick by brick, lie by lie, on the foundation of a trust I'd bled for on a dock floor. I sat there on my office floor with that photo in my hand. Powdered sugar, a maple bar, a boy laughing on my shoulders outside a donut shop on Hawthorne. And for a second, I just let myself be in it. Let myself remember what it felt like before any of this. Before the hospital, before Carol's lawyer, before a room full of strangers watching my own son decide my body was a liability for his wedding day. I gave him everything I had left in me, and he looked right through it like it was nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light outside to go orange, then gray, then nearly gone. My phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Local area code. I almost didn't answer it. A man who gives his legs for his son for free will not give his toast for a lie. That's what I decided. Sitting there with that phone buzzing in my hand, the room gone dark except for the glow of the screen. I want you to remember that line, because everything that happens next comes out of it. I answered. Mr. Delacroix? Hi, this is Megan. I'm the events coordinator over at the club for your son's wedding. So sorry to bother you this late. Here we go. We're having an issue with the deposit. The wire transfer from your attorney's office didn't clear this afternoon, and our bank flagged the funding source as blocked entirely. The groom's mother said to call you directly, that you'd handle it. Is everything all right? I sat there on that office floor, the photo still in my other hand, powdered sugar frozen forever on a 7-year-old's face in a faded print. I looked at my bad leg stretched out in front of me on the carpet. Is everything all right? I almost laughed. Almost. What came out instead was low and tired, a sound I barely recognized as my own voice. No, I said. Everything is not all right. Silence on her end. I could hear a printer running somewhere in her office. Cancel the booking, I said. Her breath caught. I'm sorry, sir. Cancel it. All of it. Mr. Delacroix, the contract is in your name. If we cancel now, the deposit is forfeited. That's over $35,000. I know. Sir, I don't think you understand. That's non-refundable. Once we process this. I know, I said again. Calmer this time, almost gentle. Cancel it anyway. And I hung up. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't call Carol. I sat there in the dark with an old photograph and let the silence do the talking for me. You want to know something? That was the first time in 11 years I felt like I had control of anything. Not rage, not revenge, not yet. That word gets thrown around too easy, and this wasn't about revenge, not in that moment. It was about a man finally putting his hand up and saying no more. $35,000, gone, just like that, and he doesn't even know it happened yet. If you've been with me this far, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this story is about to get a whole lot bigger. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared of what I'd done. I want to be real clear about that. I slept fine with the decision. What kept me up was waiting. It didn't ring that night. It rang the next morning at 7:20, while I was standing at my kitchen counter eating a bowl of oatmeal. Same breakfast I've had since Ethan was in diapers. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up, mostly to see if my hand would shake. It didn't. Dad? His voice was tight, high, the voice of somebody who hadn't slept. Dad, what did you do? The club called Mom. They said the booking's canceled. They said you told them to cancel it. Is that true? There it is. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry about the toast. Just what did you do to my wedding? It's true, I said. Why would you do that? You told me to sit up front and let another man speak for me, Ethan, I said. I'm just giving you a little more room up there. He went quiet. I could hear his breathing, sharp and uneven, and somewhere behind him, Carol's voice, muffled, asking what was going on. You're being cruel, he finally said. Cruel. That word landed somewhere behind my ribs and just sat there, ugly and heavy. No, son, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm being finished. I hung up before he could answer. Here's something you need to know about a discretionary spendthrift trust. It's a legal vault. I built it to protect Ethan from other people, and if I'm honest, from my own instinct to give him everything without a second thought. Because it's discretionary, that means I have the final say on every dollar that leaves it. It runs entirely through me. But Doug was slick. He'd convinced Ethan to sign a stack of paperwork almost a year earlier, using his future milestone payouts as collateral guarantee on a commercial real estate loan Doug needed for an investment fund. Here's the catch. A bank won't accept a discretionary trust as collateral unless the trustee, me, signs off on it personally. Doug knew I'd say no, so he did what desperate men do. He forged my signature on the guarantee paperwork, planning to use the wedding gifts and goodwill to quietly cover the debt before anyone noticed the forgery. He miscalculated badly. Monday morning, I called my attorney, David Chen, and told him to freeze all wedding-related distributions and flag any documents bearing my signature for verification. By Wednesday, the dominoes started falling. The florist, the caterer, the string quartet that never should have been playing at a rehearsal dinner in the first place, all of them hit a wall. Invoices bounced back insufficient funds. I didn't stop there. I also pulled the trust backing from a bridge loan Doug and Carol had been using to cover the gap between their income and the house they were living in, past their means. Instead of calling me to ask what was happening, Carol and Ethan decided to go public. My neighbor Marisol knocked on my door Thursday evening, holding her phone out like it was a live grenade. Carol had gone full production, ring light, kitchen island, tears on cue. Tagged local Portland community pages and the groom's family's business accounts, dabbing at her eyes, saying his father is holding his wedding hostage out of jealousy because another man is stepping in to give the toast, that I was bitter and controlling. She even pinned a comment at the top. This family has lawyers. We will see him in court. The internet did what it always does. Hundreds of strangers calling me a monster in a comment section for something they knew nothing about. But Carol made a fatal mistake. By tagging the groom's family, the Whitmores, people who valued their privacy above almost everything else, she dragged a messy, low-class internet fight straight to their doorstep. She thought she was weaponizing them against me. Instead, she guaranteed they'd cut the whole situation loose. And then the trap snapped shut on its own. When the automated bridge loan payment on their house bounced that following Tuesday, it triggered a flag at the bank's compliance department. A human auditor pulled the file to understand why a multi-million-dollar trust had missed a scheduled payment. They looked at Doug's commercial loan file. They looked at the guarantee signature. Then they called my attorney to verify it. David took one look at the forged document and told them the truth. Frank Delacroix never signed this. By Wednesday afternoon, it wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a federal bank fraud investigation. The bank froze Doug's accounts and called the entire commercial loan due immediately. At the same time, David enforced the penalty clauses buried in the house bridge loan. Their mortgage payment more than tripled overnight, with 30 days to pay or vacate. Doug Ferris, smooth-talking wealth consultant, was staring down a federal loan default and eviction from a house he never should have been able to afford in the first place. Sitting next to a wife who just torched her ex-husband's reputation online for a wedding that no longer had a venue. I won't lie to you. There was a small, ugly human part of me that felt something close to satisfaction watching that unfold. But mostly, I just felt tired. I want you to understand something about this stretch of time. Because it's easy to make it sound like I was some mastermind sitting in a dark room pulling strings with an evil grin on my face. That's not what it was. Mostly, it was quiet. I went to work. Precision shop out in Milwaukee, same as always. Clocked in, kept my head down. Came home. Stopped by a diner on Milwaukee Avenue a couple nights that week. Sat alone at the counter with a burger and a cup of coffee. Because some things a man does just to remember what normal feels like. I didn't check social media. Marisol did that for me, God bless her, showing up at my door every couple days with updates I never asked for, but somehow needed to hear anyway. They deleted the second video, she told me on a Friday. The one calling out the Whitmores directly. That's bad, Frank. She looked at me the way people look at you when they're trying to figure out if you're actually okay. You all right? Was I all right? I thought about that dining room. About Ethan's face when he looked at my cane like it belonged to a stranger. About 11 years of Saturdays, maple bars, a little boy on my shoulders yelling, "There's my hero," to a loading yard full of men who believed it just as much as I did. I will be, I told her. And for the first time in a long while, I actually believed it. Because somewhere out past Lake Oswego, a house was about to lose its funding. A wedding venue had already lost its deposit. A stepfather was about to lose a whole lot more than a leased sedan. And none of them saw what was coming next. My phone buzzed on the counter. Text message. No name attached, just a number I recognized as Carol's sister. Somebody who hadn't spoken to me directly in almost a decade. Frank, you need to see this. Call me. I stared at that message for a long moment. Whatever this was, I thought, it wasn't going to be good news. I picked up the phone and dialed. And if you've been listening this far, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because this is where it really turns. Some men beg on their knees for money. My son did it in my living room. I still remember every word of it. Let me back up. That call from Carol's sister, a woman named Denise who I hadn't heard from since maybe 2016. That was the first domino I didn't push myself. That one just fell on its own. Frank, it's Denise. Her voice was tight, rushed. I probably shouldn't be calling you. Carol would kill me, but somebody needs to. Denise, what's going on? Doug's gone. I sat down on my kitchen stool. Gone where? Nobody knows. The second the bank auditors flagged that forged signature and froze his accounts, he knew it was over. Packed a bag that same night and left. Didn't say a word to Carol. She woke up to an empty closet and the house surrounded by federal investigators serving a warrant. A pause. He knew the fraud charges were coming, Frank. He ran before they could put the cuffs on him. Total coward. Runs the second the money dries up. And the house? I asked, already knowing. Notice of default came Thursday. They've got 30 days before the bank starts foreclosure. I looked down at my own hand wrapped around the phone. This body paid for that house, in a way nobody at that dining room table wanted to admit. And the man who told him a stepfather would look smoother, giving that toast, abandoned him the second things got hard. Funny how that works. Thanks for telling me, Denise, I said. Frank, she hesitated. Are you going to help them? I didn't answer that question. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Not even to Denise. I just said goodnight and hung up. I heard about the rest through Marisol, same as everything else that month. The Whitmores found out about the fraud investigation the same week. Small enough social circle out there that everybody's one phone call from everybody else. And families like the Whitmores have a lot of phone calls at their disposal. A stepfather under federal bank fraud scrutiny. A public smear campaign gone sideways, looking less like righteous outrage, and more like a family imploding in real time online. A canceled venue. A frozen trust that had clearly been funding their entire lifestyle. None of that plays well with people who care that much about appearances. Amanda, the bride, decent enough from what little I'd seen of her, though clearly raised in a family that valued image above almost everything, called Ethan on a Sunday afternoon. I never got the transcript, but I heard enough secondhand to know how it went. Her family had decided the risk to their name wasn't worth it. Families like that don't survive scandal by association. They survive by getting far away from it. Fast. With a clean statement about wishing the young man well, and never using the words fraud or lawsuit or trust fund again. The wedding was off. Just like that. Fiancé gone. Stepfather gone. House about to be gone. And every single one of those things had my name quietly written somewhere underneath it, holding it all up the whole time. Right up until I stopped holding it up. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I heard, but it wasn't joy. It wasn't satisfaction either, not really. It was something quieter and heavier than that. It felt like watching a house of cards fall down that I built the foundation for and never once got thanked for building. It was a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after that dining room, when I heard the knock on my apartment door. I knew before I opened it. Some part of you always knows. I opened the door, and there they were. Carol and Ethan, standing in the hallway of my modest building, looking about as far from that golf club dining room as two people could get. Carol's makeup was smudged, hair pulled back messy instead of styled. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept in a week, hollow around the eyes, hands shaking slightly at his sides. The hands that used to hold mine on Saturdays. Now they're the ones shaking. Frank, Carol's voice cracked on my name. Can we come in? A month ago, she called me a bitter, controlling man on the internet in front of thousands of strangers. Now she's standing in my hallway, asking permission to come inside. I stepped back and let them in. Not because I owed them anything, but because whatever I was about to say, I wanted to say it sitting down, and I wanted them to have to look me in the eye while I did it. They sat on my couch, small, second-hand, nothing fancy, the kind of couch that probably embarrassed them more than my cane ever did. I sat across from them, in the one chair I own with the ottoman, and I waited. I'd waited 11 years for this conversation. I could wait another minute. Ethan broke first. He slid off the couch onto his knees on my living room floor, and I want to tell you that didn't do something to me, watching my own son kneel in front of me, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't. Dad, please. His voice was raw, cracked down the middle. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, son. But go on. The venue's gone. The house. We're going to lose the house, Dad. Doug's gone. He just left. Didn't even say goodbye. And I don't. He stopped, pressing his shaking hands against his face. The feds came to the house. They said he forged your name. They said he used my signature to commit bank fraud. And now everything is gone. I don't know what to do. Please, just release the trust. Please. Carol was crying now too, quiet and controlled. The practiced kind of crying that had worked on plenty of people before me. Frank, we're begging you. We have nowhere else to go. You have nowhere else to go. 11 years ago, I had a shattered hip and a leg that would never work right again, and nowhere else to go either. Nobody knelt on my floor for me. I didn't say any of that yet. I let the silence sit there, heavy, while Ethan cried on my carpet. And then he said it, the thing I didn't see coming, even after everything. I remember Saturdays, he said, barely above a whisper, looking up at me with eyes that looked for just a second, like the 7-year-old who used to ride my shoulders to the donut shop. I remember the maple bars. I remember, he stopped. Come on, I said. Say it, finish the sentence. His mouth opened, closed. Something moved behind his eyes. Something old. Something buried under 11 years of his mother's careful reconstruction. And for one full second, I thought he was finally going to say it. I remember what happened at the yard. I remember what you did for me. He didn't say it. He looked down at the carpet instead, and whatever had almost surfaced went back under. He knows. Somewhere in there, underneath everything his mother built, he knows exactly what this body did for him. And he still can't bring himself to say it out loud. Even now. Even on his knees. That's the moment something in me finally closed all the way. I stood up, slow, unhurried, the way you stand up when you've made peace with a decision instead of reacting to one. I walked to the small table by the window, the one with 2 chairs where I eat breakfast alone most mornings, and I sat down. I looked at both of them, still on my couch and my floor, and I waited until Ethan lifted his head to look at me. Then I set my cane flat on the table in front of me. Right there in plain sight, where nobody could look away from it. You said this would embarrass you at your wedding, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want that on the record. It didn't shake at all. But this cane is the only reason you still have 2 legs to stand on at all. Ethan made a sound like the air had been knocked out of him. I saved you once, son, I said. I won't save you again. Nobody moved. Carol had gone completely pale, hand pressed over her mouth. Ethan just knelt there on my carpet, staring at that cane on the table like he was seeing it, really seeing it, for the very first time in his entire life. 11 years. 11 years of Saturdays and maple bars and a settlement I never spent a dime of. And it took him standing on the wreckage of everything I built for him to finally look at this cane and understand what it actually means. Too late, son. Too late. I stood up. I walked past both of them, past the couch, past 11 years of a life I gave everything to build, and I went to the window. Portland was doing its evening thing out there. Street lights flickering on along the avenue. Somebody's dog barking 2 floors down. Ordinary life going on. Ordinary and indifferent to what had just happened in my living room. I heard Carol behind me, voice breaking. "Frank, please, we have nowhere." I didn't turn around. I reached up and closed the curtain. I heard them sit there a moment longer. The particular silence of two people realizing there's nothing left to say that's going to change anything. Then I heard the couch creak. Footsteps. The door opening and closing. Quiet. None of the drama of that dining room. None of the videos. None of the accusations. Just quiet. I didn't watch them leave. I stood at that closed curtain a long time, my hand resting on the windowsill, and I let the apartment go silent around me. I'll give you the rest quickly, because you've earned the ending, and I don't believe in dragging out good news any more than I believe in dragging out bad news. Carol and Ethan were out of the house within the month. Because it was an unbacked bridge loan and not a standard mortgage, the bank moved fast, 30 days to clear out before the locks changed. It was quiet and unglamorous. None of the internet fanfare that came with the accusations. Last I heard through Denise, they'd moved into a 2-bedroom rental out toward Gresham. Modest, unremarkable. The kind of place I'd lived in most of my adult life, while they were living in a house with a view of the golf course. Doug never resurfaced in Portland. Word got around eventually, same small-town grapevine that told me everything else, that the bank fraud investigation turned into actual federal charges. Wire fraud, false collateral representation, the whole ugly list. Last anybody heard, he was somewhere down in Arizona, living under considerably less shine than the leased sedan days, waiting on a court date he couldn't smooth-talk his way out of. A total coward to the end. Didn't even have the spine to face what he built. The Whitmores never spoke to Ethan again. Not one call, not one message. Nothing but a clean, well-lawyered silence. The kind families like that are very, very good at. As for the trust, I never released it. Not the wedding money, not the house money, none of it. David restructured the whole thing eventually. Locked it down tighter than before. New terms that made sure nobody but Ethan himself, as an adult making his own honest choices, could ever touch it again. No stepfather, no mother, no fiancé's family pressure. Just him, if he ever earns his own way back to deserving it. Maybe someday he will. That's not up to me anymore. That's up to him. As for me, I still live in that same 1-bedroom off Milwaukee Avenue. Still drive that same Ford Ranger. Still work the same quiet trade. Still stop into that diner some nights for a burger and a cup of coffee. Alone at the counter. Same as always. Ray still calls me every year. Same as always too. Right around the anniversary. Last time we talked, he said something that stuck with me. "You did good, Delacroix. Not the wedding thing. The other thing. 11 years ago, you did good." I know, Ray. I've always known. It just took the rest of the world a little while to catch up. Some Saturdays, when the weather's right, I still walk down to that donut shop on Hawthorne. I still order a maple bar, even though I never even much liked maple bars. I just liked watching him eat them. I sit at the counter alone now, and I look down at this leg, this bad hip, this cane that apparently wasn't good enough for a wedding video. And I think about a 7-year-old boy on my shoulders screaming, "There's my hero," to a loading yard full of men who believed him completely. I'd still do it again. 1,000,000 times over, I'd still do it again. That was never the question. It was never going to be the question. The question was whether he'd ever be brave enough to say thank you. He wasn't. Not yet, anyway. But this cane, it's not waiting around for it anymore. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one.